Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is a installation video for the Lowrance Ghost trolling motor, and we're going to start out by unboxing or opening the K-Star unit, and this would be just like you just got it in the mail. So that case is going to come in. We're doing t-shirts that are custom for owners, so they're going to be unique to owners, and that'll be included in the package, at least for the first 100 or so. So here's the unit, the foot pedal, which if you've been watching any of our videos, you know what these pieces are, but you got the foot pedal and the junction block and the motor and the rail. So we're gonna start out by moving the parts that we're not using right now out of the way, which would be the foot pedal and the junction block, which is our cabling distribution system. And if you notice, we ship the motors assemblies all put together. So they are ready to go, and we do that because we spend about a day testing, running the whole unit through a test. So we want to make sure everything fits, and we do a burn in on that motor. So the first step of this is taking this apart, and it adds maybe 5 minutes to the whole install process, but we think that it's a positive because it shows you how things go together before you put them on the trolling motor. You can see where all the screws go and basically just reverse the whole process. So here we are, we're taking apart the main clamp, and this is a clamp that mounts the unit to the upper shaft. And you'll see when we get it on the trolling motor, the upper shaft of the Lowrance Ghost doesn't move. It's stationary, and we grab onto that. So that's what mounts our unit. It's really a nice, simple mounting setup. So here's the motor main drive clamp that we're taking off. It's held on by 4 screws, and that just slides off the end, and then the drive unit comes out. So, and this is multiple parts. So we want to point out the clamps. If you notice, you'll see little silver pins on a lot of these parts, and those pins are stainless steel precision pins, 1/8 inch diameter, and they locate everything. So when you drill and mount with screws, it's not located well enough to do what we're doing. So much like precision scopes are made, we use those pins to locate these parts. So with that, this is the trolling motor mirror pickup gear, and it's all of these pieces in the drive assembly are two pieces. So they all come together and clamshell around the shaft. This is the only part of our assembly that actually touches the trolling motor shaft itself. So all we're doing here is taking these parts apart, breaking them down in half, and we just be mindful and want to keep track of these pins because they can fall out. So we do include a couple extra ones in the small parts box, which is under this, on the underside of this case, if you lose some, but try to keep track of those. So here we're taking apart the main drive unit, and inside of this assembly is what we call the flex disc, and this is what allows everything to work. Without this, it doesn't work, and it's a flexible joint that allows the trolling motor shaft to move. The first efforts of this, we found out that the trolling motor shaft itself moved. It could move up to 15 degrees depending on how long the shaft is, how much load is on the shaft. If you bump into things, it can move a lot. It even moves when you stow the trolling motor. So with that, we came up with this solution. So that's the main Delrin drive. That's what runs off the aluminum gear. Again, it's pinned. This is the flex disc. The flex disc has 3 screws that go down through it into the upper rail mount and 3 screws that come up through it into the Delrin drive gear. So we've got 3 screws up, 3 screws down, and they're offset by 60 degrees. And this creates something of a CV joint if you've ever done anything in the automotive world. So that's the flex disc, and you can see how the 3 screws going one way, 3 screws going the other way, and it's got a split in it so that you can get it on the shaft. So last step of this is just taking apart the upper rail mount. Again, it's screwed together with this part. This is the only part that has longer screws than a 1/2 inch, and these are unique screws. So you want to kind of keep track of these separate. They're 1 inch long, 8/32 screws. Again, everything's pinned. You'll see we've got a pin on each side, and it snaps together on those pins. So that's it. And once all these parts are split, we can go over and start getting things ready for the trolling motor. Those three screws on the motor stay intact. You don't want to take those out because the motor will come apart. So we want to keep those in. But when you get started, it should look just like this. Now we're over the trolling motor. One of the first things I want to point out is we've removed the clamp that's the upper bushing, centering bushing clamp. And it's really not a good design. And the way this is made is, you see there's a tapered plastic bushing that inserts up into a bearing, and the design goal is for it to push up through there and stay centered that way. The problem is that this is the factory Lowrance Ghost clamp. The problem is the clamp doesn't, it gets tight, but it doesn't stay tight. It wallows out, and that clamp ends up sliding down the shaft just a little bit, and when it does, it gets all kinds of play. So we discard this clamp and replace it with what I think is a dramatically better solution. You see the little grooves in there. Those grooves are what's designed to hold that in place. And I just don't think it does a good job holding that pressure, upward pressure on that tapered bushing into the bearing. So here's our part, and this is our trolling motor drive gear. And you'll notice it's a gear. It's 2 pieces, and you'll see it's got these little flexible wings inside of it. And we have screws that come in from the outside that press those into the shaft. So we can independently put this gear on and then tighten it up. And these little side loading screws allow us to put way more pressure on the shaft than the factory clamp could. And it really locks things down, locks it in place. So we put this on, and it's got 2 screws that go through to 8/32 1/2 inch screws to hold it together. Then we can push it up against that centering bushing and start to progressively tighten those little screws, the little side loading set screws. Sorry, I'm kind of blocking everything here. It makes it a little difficult to see, but this will all make a lot of sense when you go to do your install. So I've got it on there. The gear is now tight, but you'll notice the gear can still move. So this allows us to preload that bushing, that centering bushing. So I'm going to push that gear up into that bushing tight, and now tighten it down. So we get a really good clamp on that centering bushing. I think it's a big improvement over the factory clamp. Okay, so we just get these four. We got two set screws on each side that push those little flexures into the shaft. And like I said, once it's on, it's really clamped in, and you'll notice immediately the difference in that this clamp and the factory clamp. So this is the small parts box that's under the cutouts on the top of your case, and in here you'll have cables and you'll have boxes of screws. You also see the perspective mode mount in there. If you choose that option, it'll be an option to add on if you're running perspective mode. That's the pickup sensor, pivot pickup sensor. There's the perspective mount. And then the last piece here is the centering bushing. And this is what goes on under the rail at the bottom of the shaft. And it basically is just a locating device and allows it to spin around the shaft. So this just keeps us coaxial with the shaft. So now we're pretty much ready to start stacking up these parts. First one that will go on is the Delrin drive gear. The gear part of that goes up towards the trolling motor pickup gear. This is held on by two 8/32 half-inch long screws. And one thing, you don't want to get carried away on tightening down these screws that are in the Delrin parts. They kind of, that material's elastic enough that it'll grip the screw. So just get it finger tight and then just add a quarter turn to it. So the next piece will go on, be the flex disc. Again, we've got 3 screws going up, 3 screws going down. And this just you just twist it a little bit and snap it on. So the order of operation here is pretty important. If you screwed this to the underside of the Delrin drive gear, then you wouldn't be able to get this piece on. So we've got to do this 3 screws going down into the upper rail mount before we do the 3 screws going up into the Delrin drive gear. So this piece goes together, and I just run one of the long screws in there. This won't really be held together until you get the rail on, but I just put one of the screws in there just to kind of give it a little support and hold it together while you're putting on the flex disc. Just one note: the T handle. These are Klein T handle Allen wrenches, and they've got a ball end on them, and they're kind of long, and they're really handy for this install. And we're not sending Allen keys with this. If you need Allen keys, you need to go ahead and get them. I get Allen keys with pretty much everything I buy, and I just end up tossing them, so it seems pretty wasteful. So we're not going to include them, but we use 3 or 4 different sizes, and they're all SAE sizes. And on these screws that go down through the flex disc, there's a rubber grommet on the flex disc. You don't want to over preload that rubber grommet. So just get this down to where you'll feel it starting to get snug, and then just give it a little bit more, and then that's it. So you don't want to over tighten these. And same thing for the screws going up through the bottom into the Delrin drive gear. Just get them. You'll feel it start to get some resistance, and you'll know it's starting to preload that rubber grommet, and then you're good. Here you can really see how the long T handle Allen with the ball end are really helpful. And I go around, I do 2 or 3 turns on each one and just kind of progressively tighten those up, and it's really easy. So now the main drive gear is put together, and we've got the trolling motor mirror pickup gear on, and we're ready for putting on the motor. And I apologize, I should have probably spun the camera around the other way to get some of this from the other side. So I've inserted a little video clip here in a minute that'll help this make a little bit more sense. So we push everything up together. The little chrome ring bearing holder there's a slot in the upper part of the motor that you can't screw up. So you'll see that when you start putting this together, and we'll include pictures as well with the instructions. But this is easy to put together. But this upper clamp, it's got 4 10/32 screws, a little bit heavier screws, because these are what hold the whole unit to the trolling motor shaft. So this goes on, if you've ever put a scope on a rifle, this goes on exactly like a set of scope rings on a rifle. We're just putting pressure down, and there's a small gap that's left between this clamp and the motor, and you want to try to get that gap to be the same on each side, which is the same at the top and the bottom, and you'll want to snug this up pretty good. The motor unit itself can orient any way it wants to on this shaft. Here's a little video of a shot of it after getting set up, and you can see the gap at the top and bottom. Those are the 2 gaps that you want to get to be about the same. So again, this motor can orient around. So if you wanted to put the motor on the other side of the trolling motor, you could. I tend to like it on this side because the wiring hookup is kind of underneath, and it's kind of protected, and it doesn't stick out off it's all kind of tucked in on the inside of the boat. And you'll see it's very small and very compact, and it's not nearly as wide as most of the trolling motors, so it will not interfere with any of your electronics. So we're putting setting the gear in there, and I like to do so with those screw holes facing straight up, and that makes life easier when you go to do setup. So this end cap piece goes on. It'll only go on one way, and it's held on by 4 screws, 4 8/32 half-inch screws. You'll see that slot that goes on the trolling motor gear. So this goes on. It's all pinned on. So the fit up is very tight. It's really, really nice. This end cap screws all the way down, so there's no gap left around this end cap piece. It is just on there as a cap. Just as a side note, you can see down at the bottom of the screen the guide for the main trolling motor cable. You'll see the little magnetic sensor underneath it. We're going to have another video that we'll post on how to install that pivot sensor. So now the motor's installed. It's tight. We're ready to put the rail on. You'll notice the rail is 2 pieces, but it comes already pre-assembled unless you get the long version for the longer Lowrance. And then you'll have to put those 2 screws in to mount it together. But you'll see it on the lower end of it, there's a screw holes that will notch into that centering ring. So that's notched out, and it's threaded to accept screws that come through the side of that Delrin centering ring. So here we use these are the only places on the unit that we're using longer screws. These are 1-inch 8/32 screws, and that's so that they can bind together the upper rail mount. So we've got two of those. They go into the top two screw locations, and then the other two are just 1/2 inch long screws. So now all that's left is to put two screws through the side of the lower into the centering ring on the lower end of the shaft. We are done and ready to mount transducer cables. So this install, I think I shot this video in real time, I think, and I was trying to explain things as I was doing it. The audio turned out bad, so I'm overlaying the audio. But this video, I could have done this install, I think, in about 10 minutes if I was in a hurry. So super compact. You see the rail, you see all the screw. Those are all screw holes. So we can do so many neat things. We can do cable management. We can do hydrowave. You can do a stack of transducers. Whatever you want to do, we can mount it right down that rail. It's really a flexible system. It's super light. It's super strong. It's if you're into archery, it's not unlike the riser on a bow. So it's really a neat setup. So I'm explaining here. I've had a number of people say that they won't be able to raise the shaft and adjust the depth, which is simply not true. If you notice here, we clamp onto the shaft and we end up losing just about 2 inches of shaft length from this. So that collar is right up underneath the upper clamp. So when you retract this thing, you're not losing much. So if it's got 12 inches of adjustment from the factory, I'm going to say that you've got at least 10 inches left after installing this. So you've got a tremendous amount of flexibility. There you can get a better look at the transducer mounts. We've got 2 transducer mounts. If you want to run 3 transducers, we can accommodate that as well. So it's really flexible. I don't put it on, but the perspective mount is a separate bracket. That'll be an add-on for people that want to run that. It'll be in the $100 range, and it's got 64 serrations on it, so it's got twice as many as the factory mount, and that allows us to do 5.65 degrees of angle adjustment. We've got a granularity there that if you want to adjust for depth, that the factory mount just simply doesn't have. So this is pretty much it. And it's an easy install. It's probably, for a first timer, it's less than a 20-minute install. So thanks for joining us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thanks.